In a shocking turn of events, a plane carrying hundreds of deported migrants has touched down in Venezuela, sparking outrage and raising serious concerns about the ongoing border crisis. As nations tighten immigration policies, the plight of these migrants has become a focal point in the heated debate surrounding immigration enforcement and human rights. This unprecedented move has left families torn apart and many questioning the ethics of such actions. In this video, we dive into the details of this controversial development, its broader implications, and what it means for the future of immigration policy. Stay tuned.
I want to tie in that story to our next story, and this is our segue here. Remember, one of the rationales from the Trump DOJ in dismissing the Eric Adams indictment was because it was infringing on Adams' ability there in the Big Apple to enact illegal immigration enforcement in the form of deportations. Let's go now from New York City to Venezuela. Take a look at this. This is breaking news right now. This is a live picture there on the tarmac at Venezuela's main international airport, and you are seeing now yet another deportation flight.
The global immigration landscape has been under intense scrutiny as border crises continue to unfold. In a world where migration is shaped by war, economic disparity, and political instability, nations have been forced to reevaluate their immigration policies. Recently, the situation has reached a new level of severity with the deportation of thousands of migrants, highlighting the harsh realities of border enforcement. A particularly shocking incident occurred when a plane filled with deported individuals landed in Venezuela, thrusting the already tense issue of immigration into the spotlight. This event underscores the deepening crisis at borders around the world, where the divide between national security and human rights has never been more pronounced. As these deportations continue, the global community must grapple with the complex intersection of policy, morality, and the human cost of these decisions. The recent deportation of a plane full of migrants to Venezuela marks a disturbing escalation in the ongoing border crisis. The aircraft, carrying over 100 people, was sent back to Venezuela under strict immigration enforcement measures. While this may seem like a routine operation, the circumstances surrounding the flight have caused shockwaves across the international community. Many of the deported individuals had lived in the country for years, built lives, and contributed to the economy. Forced to leave their homes, often without warning or preparation, they are now faced with uncertainty in a nation already struggling with economic and political turmoil. The act of deporting such a large group to Venezuela raises significant ethical and humanitarian concerns, especially given the dire state of the country's infrastructure and security. The incident has ignited a global conversation on the boundaries of immigration policies.
Time for your morning headlines. The U.S. and Venezuela once again engaged in repatriation flights. So this is video received here in our newsroom a couple hours ago from Venezuela, where 200 people who were deported from the U.S. were then sent back home. American officials releasing a statement saying, quote, "These individuals had no legal basis to be here in the United States. The plane did make a brief stop in Honduras before it eventually got to Venezuela. Reports state the flight was done in a, quote, orderly and safe manner. These flights, though, put on hold in February. But now Venezuelans are demanding the return of immigrants the U.S. had flown to El Salvador to be imprisoned earlier this month."
Tax day is April 15th, but that's not the only reason the IRS is in the headlines today. They're getting closer to finalizing an information sharing agreement.
The migrants aboard the plane to Venezuela were primarily from countries such as Central America, where political instability, poverty, and violence have forced many to flee in search of safety and opportunities. Over the years, they had found refuge in countries with more stable economies, but lived in constant fear of deportation. For many, the journey had been long and arduous, crossing dangerous territories and enduring hardships. As deportation became a reality, These individuals were left stranded in a country that, for many, felt like an unfamiliar place despite their roots there. Many had left Venezuela years ago, escaping the very conditions that are now waiting for them upon their return. The deported group, including men, women, and children, now face the harsh realities of a crumbling nation that struggles to provide basic necessities to its citizens. The mass deportation to Venezuela was not a random event, but rather a reflection of the aggressive stance many governments have taken towards immigration control. In recent years, countries worldwide have ramped up enforcement, focusing on stricter deportation policies as part of broader attempts to curb illegal immigration. In this particular case, the U.S. government utilized its Immigration Enforcement Agency to execute the operation, justifying it under the grounds of national security and the prevention of illegal immigration. These deportations are often seen as a deterrent to others seeking refuge, aiming to discourage potential migrants from attempting to cross borders without legal authorization. However, this approach has sparked widespread criticism from human rights groups, who argue that such policies prioritize border control over the well-being and human dignity of individuals seeking safety. The questions remain: is this policy effective, or is it merely exacerbating the global immigration crisis? For Venezuela, the arrival of deported migrants represents yet another layer of complexity in the ongoing humanitarian crisis. The country, which has already been grappling with economic collapse, political unrest, and widespread shortages, is now facing an influx of individuals with little to no resources. The deported migrants, many of whom had left Venezuela years ago, are returning to a country that is struggling to meet the basic needs of its citizens, let alone integrate such a large group of returnees. These migrants are often left without proper support systems, as Venezuela's infrastructure is already overwhelmed by its own population's needs. This sudden wave of deportations exacerbates the challenges facing local communities, including an increased demand for food, shelter, and healthcare. For many Venezuelans, the arrival of deportees is a painful reminder of the country's deteriorating conditions and uncertain future.
Right now, it seems like a roller coaster because of all the changes.
At the Brighton Park Neighborhood Council, they've helped new arrivals find a home in Chicago. With TPS, they say those same immigrants pay their rent, pay their taxes.
All of us that work and contribute to this country, we all get taxes deducted. Undocumented people, they also get taxes deducted, Social Security.
Now we're told the fear is overwhelming, that Immigration and Customs Enforcement could use details from federal applications to find applicants soon eligible for deportation.
Retaliation, coming and looking for them, knowing where they live, where they work.
It's not clear when TPS for Venezuelans will be terminated. Sabrina Franza, CBS News, Chicago.
The forced deportation of migrants, particularly to countries like Venezuela, has ignited intense humanitarian debates. Critics argue that deportations, especially those that return people to unstable and dangerous environments, violate basic human rights. While governments often justify these actions as necessary to maintain border security, the ethical implications cannot be ignored. For many of those deported, returning to their home countries means facing the very dangers they fled. In the case of Venezuela, this is especially true as the country continues to battle political instability, violence, and poverty. The ethical dilemma lies in balancing national security with the protection of human life. Should governments prioritize the safety of their own citizens, or should they consider the risks faced by those who are forced back into countries unable to provide the basic resources necessary for survival? The issue raises fundamental questions about how nations define and protect human dignity.
With the Department of Homeland Security, a person familiar with the matter says it would enable ICE to submit names and addresses of people who might be in the U.S. illegally. The source says the IRS could then cross-reference and confirm that information. The president's supporters say his immigration policies are what voters want. Critics say involving the IRS could endanger taxpayer privacy. The agency works under laws that usually prohibit the release of personal information.
Well, Second Lady Usha Vance is planning to visit Greenland this week. Her office says that Mrs. Vance and one of her children will be leaving Thursday. They will visit historic sites and learn more about Greenland's heritage as part of the U.S. delegation. This trip, of course, comes after President Trump has said several times in recent weeks that America should take control of the
Immigration policies vary widely across the globe, with countries taking vastly different approaches to managing migration. Some nations enforce strict border controls, focusing heavily on deterring illegal immigration, while others have more lenient policies that prioritize humanitarian concerns. In recent years, global trends show a tightening of immigration regulations, with countries increasingly favoring enforcement over protection. For instance, the United States, under its zero-tolerance approach, has been criticized for its aggressive deportations, while European countries have faced similar challenges with refugees fleeing conflict zones. On the other hand, countries like Canada and Germany have embraced more inclusive policies, focusing on refugee resettlement and immigration pathways. The contrasting policies highlight the ongoing global debate over balancing national security, economic needs, and human rights in immigration management.
The administration does not recognize Venezuela's autocratic leader, Nicolas Maduro, as the duly elected leader of Venezuela. Nonetheless, the Trump administration brokered a deal with the Maduro government in order for the United States to send some of these deportation flights to Venezuela to return some of these undocumented migrants who were from Venezuela in the first place. And that's what you're seeing right now, some of them. So remember, during the Biden administration, there was a cutoff, a particular date that if a Venezuelan undocumented migrant made it to the United States by whatever means, they would be shielded from deportation under this designation known as Temporary Protected Status, TPS. And so now, of course, with the Trump administration, that is no longer operative. And that is why you are seeing some of these undocumented Venezuelan migrants return now to their country of origin. Now, remember,
International law plays a critical role in shaping immigration enforcement policies, particularly when it comes to human rights protections for migrants. The United Nations, through conventions like the 1951 Refugee Convention, sets clear standards for the treatment of refugees and asylum seekers, advocating for non-refoulement, which prohibits the return of individuals to places where they could face persecution. Despite these international protections, many countries continue to implement strict immigration controls that critics argue violate these laws. For example, deportations to unsafe countries or the separation of families at the border have raised significant legal concerns. While international law provides a framework for protecting migrants, enforcement often varies by country, leading to inconsistencies in the application of human rights standards. This discrepancy underscores the need for a more cohesive global approach to immigration law. The deportation of migrants, especially in high-profile cases like the plane to Venezuela, has triggered widespread protests and public outcry. Across the world, individuals, advocacy groups, and even political leaders have voiced their opposition to such harsh policies. Human rights organizations argue that deporting individuals to dangerous and unstable countries constitutes a violation of their fundamental rights. Protests have erupted in cities where large numbers of deportees originated, with demonstrators calling for more humane immigration policies and better treatment of migrants. Public opinion on immigration enforcement remains deeply divided, with some supporting stricter border controls, while others demand more compassion and refuge for those fleeing violence and economic hardship. The tension between security concerns and humanitarian principles continues to fuel public debates and protests, intensifying the calls for reform.
This is powered there by the airline Conviasa. And so a lot of these airport workers on the tarmac right now. And we're seeing a similar uniform, kind of a gray and white sweatsuit there, red masks covering some of their faces, some of their mouths. And remember, here on Live Now from Fox, we have covered extensively the crackdown on this Venezuelan gang within the United States, and they have seemingly found safe harbor illegally. That gang, remember, TDA, Tren de Aragua, it originated in a Venezuelan prison, and some of the members and expats of the gang made their way to set up shop in the United States. And we've seen a large crackdown on some of those efforts by law enforcement, including and especially not only in the New York City area, but also in the Denver metro area. Let's just listen to this sound, some of the natural sound on the ground.
The ongoing debate between border security and human rights is one of the most divisive issues in modern politics. On one side, proponents of strict border controls argue that security measures are necessary to protect national sovereignty, prevent illegal immigration, and safeguard the welfare of citizens. They believe that enforcing immigration laws is vital to maintaining order and reducing economic strain. On the other side, human rights advocates emphasize that migrants fleeing conflict, persecution, or poverty should not be treated as threats. They argue that security measures should not come at the expense of human dignity and safety, advocating for policies that prioritize the protection of vulnerable individuals. This ongoing clash between security and compassion challenges lawmakers worldwide to strike a balance between the two, often leading to polarized discussions about the ethical implications of immigration enforcement.
So almost every single person that we helped apply, because we helped them in 2023, is going to be affected by this.
Erendira Rendon and the Resurrection Project have helped 9,000 Venezuelans in Illinois apply for TPS and for asylum status.
Without temporary protective status, if somebody never applied for asylum, they are in fact eligible for deportation, and they're at risk for deportation.
Since August 31st of 2022, the city of Chicago estimates it's welcomed around 51,000 migrants from the southern border. A study done by Northeastern University last fall says around 30,000 of those people are Venezuelan nationals, settling in neighborhoods like here in Brighton Park.
Right now, it's like
The deportation crisis, highlighted by events like the flight to Venezuela, is expected to have a significant impact on future immigration laws. As nations grapple with the consequences of harsh deportations, many are reconsidering the effectiveness and morality of their immigration policies. The growing tension between security and human rights has pushed many to advocate for reform. In particular, there is an increasing call for legislation that balances the need for border security with protections for vulnerable migrants. Future laws may include more humane deportation practices, clearer asylum procedures, and better integration systems for migrants. Additionally, the international community may push for stronger commitments to human rights standards. As the global immigration landscape evolves, the lessons learned from these crises could lead to more compassionate and effective immigration frameworks that address both security concerns and the protection of migrants.
The Supreme Court has ruled that the Trump administration can go ahead and revoke temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans that are here in the U.S. and have been for years. In Chicago, where we saw a huge migration of new arrivals from Venezuela, that means big changes for a lot of people. Our Sabrina Franza explains.
Thousands of Venezuelan nationals in Chicago could soon be eligible for deportation. Those who had applied for temporary protected status, or TPS, which allows people to stay legally in the U.S. and obtain work permits. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem tried to terminate TPS for Venezuelans in February. The move was previously blocked by a lower court.
The future of global immigration remains uncertain as nations continue to navigate the complex intersection of border security, human rights, and economic needs. The rise in deportations, particularly those to unstable countries, signals a shift towards more aggressive immigration enforcement policies. However, this approach has sparked widespread criticism, with many arguing that it violates fundamental human rights.
Okay, so if you're just joining us here, we're almost at the top of the hour. You are watching scores of undocumented Venezuelan migrants arrive back in Venezuela after being deported from the United States under the Trump administration's efforts to round up some of these undocumented migrants, a majority of whom are either accused or have been convicted of committing crimes within the United States and or their country of origin. And look at all of them come off this plane. Wow. This is the second site that we have seen in the past several weeks, and they are coming from the United States by way of Honduras. And you remember some of them from the Trump administration setting up shop there at the U.S. naval base in Cuba at Guantanamo Bay, Gitmo, to house and detain some of them, waiting for these deportation flights.
As countries around the world face increasing pressure to address immigration issues, the question remains whether they can find a balance that respects both national sovereignty and humanitarian principles. In the coming years, the global community may need to reassess immigration laws and adopt more inclusive, compassionate policies that prioritize the safety and dignity of migrants while maintaining security. Only time will tell whether governments can successfully address these pressing issues or whether the border crisis will continue to escalate. As the border crisis intensifies, the future of immigration remains uncertain. Governments must find a balance between security and human rights, ensuring that policies protect both nations and individuals. The global community's response will shape the path forward, one that must prioritize compassion, justice, and humane treatment for all.